Hello, hello. This is Rebecca Johnson of Supergirl Radio. We're going to get started officially in a little bit, but I thought I would go ahead and get the live stream started. We are going to be discussing Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox for this particular live stream. So hopefully you've done your Supergirl Radio homework and you've watched it alongside with us, so that we're not going to spoil you, because we'll get into some really spoilery territory. So hopefully you've already seen it, or if you haven't actually watched the animated film, you've probably seen the Flash movie or read Flashpoint in the comics. So please feel free to share your thoughts on those different adaptations of this story, because they have some differences, some similarities, but also a lot of differences. So we'll talk about some of those. It looks like New Rachel in the chat says, I first watched this movie in 2016 because another podcast was reviewing it. Well, it's full circle for you, Rachel. This is we are another podcast who is going to review it, and we will talk about why we are reviewing it here on Supergirl Radio, because I'm sure some people would be like, why is a Supergirl podcast reviewing Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox? Supergirl is not in it. That's a great observation. We'll explain. So yeah, there's a couple of reasons that we're going to be talking about this one in particular. But we will get into that when we get into it. So if you have any thoughts about this animated feature film, or if you have any thoughts about how it connects to the Flash movie or the comic book source material, feel free to shoot that in the chat box there. And it looks like I have Morgan. Morgan, are you ready to go? Thank you for joining me. Do you have the doc? I know it's kind of last minute.
I do have the doc. I'm getting it open now. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to rumble.
Kind of like the Flash. I'm pretty late when sending those things out. So even if I had super speed, I would still be sending that to you late. So okay, I see some more questions in the chat. We will start and we will get to those in the discussion. But I think for now, let's go ahead and get started.
McGurk! I love
Not mess
typing.
with my Google Docs, Meeksy.
Supergirl Radio is going live every night of the week. How do you like it? Is becoming a human burrito a plus or a minus? I don't know. It does seem snug.
I mean, they say you are what you eat.
Kira. I love that.
So I do a podcast called Supergirl Radio, and one of our segments is Lena Luthor, Boardroom or Ballroom, because
She looks like a boss in this coat.
Nasty Luthor like a different Luthor? It's not just Lena being mean?
No.
Helen Slater here. So fun to know that you're hosting a podcast called Supergirl Radio.
Welcome to Supergirl Radio, your source for all things related to the CW Supergirl TV series and the character of Kara Zor-El. My name is Rebecca Johnson.
I'm Morgan Glennon.
And we are live and wired on the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel and the Supergirl Radio Facebook page to discuss the animated feature film from 2013. This is a 10-year-old film now that we are going to be discussing, titled Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox. Why this film and why now? It is 10 years old. Why revisit it now? Well,
why not?
Those are great questions, and I think it's very valid because we are a Supergirl podcast, and Supergirl's not in this film. So that's a
insultingly. Excuse me. Where is Supergirl? That's what I asked myself the whole film.
Well, we do have a question about that, so we can get into that. But the reason we are going to be discussing this here on Supergirl Radio is that the Flash movie featuring Sasha Caje's Supergirl and this film, this animated feature film, Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox, are both adaptations of the Flashpoint storyline in DC Comics. So because that was recently in theaters a couple of months ago, we are going to be talking about that to kind of compare and contrast and talk about some things we might have learned or what we liked or didn't like about these two adaptations. And also Morgan had never seen it. And so that was also one of the reasons that we were going to talk about it, because one of our listeners kind of called us out for not having talked about it before. So now we're doing it. We're here. We're doing
Here
it.
We are. Thriving.
So let's get right into it. We are going to discuss Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox. If you've seen the animated feature film, please share your thoughts in the chat along with us. Well, the movie description, this is a feature film, not an episode of a television show. The description from Max reads, quote, Flash tries to restore his original timeline when a ripple creates a fractured universe, unquote. So I guess that does sort of explain it. There's a lot going on that happens before and after that. But I think that captures the essence of the story pretty well. So Morgan, we've seen the Flash movie and the Flash movie's adaptation of Flashpoint. And now we've seen the Flashpoint Paradox, this animated version. Also, I don't know, did you watch the Flashpoint on the Grant Gustin TV show as well?
I did. Okay. I remember that because that was season, I want to say 3 or 4.
The beginning of season 3.
Yeah,
so
I made it that far.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So we've seen all these adaptations of Flashpoint. So what do you think the big similarities and differences are? Which one were there good versions and bad versions for you?
Yeah, you know what? I guess there were. Unfortunately, while I like the Flash TV show, I would probably peg that into one of the poorer versions of the Flashpoint storyline, because it felt like they were like really excited to do Flashpoint, and then they kind of did it, and then they're like, I mean, we can't do this for like a while. Like, We got to reset it back to status quo. But there have to be some long-term consequences. What if, and this is going to be like the wildest thing that's ever happened on television, like a baby girl just like didn't exist or became a baby boy. I don't know. We'll workshop it. It's going to be very traumatic for everyone involved. And everybody in the writer's room was like, yeah, no, that's going to be messed up. But I think
that's just like Atlantis and
just
Themyscira fighting a global war against each
No,
other. Just like it.
It felt the same. Yeah, I feel like the TV version didn't want to do it for too long, and then like really didn't want to get into the like repercussions. And also, you know, the TV version was part of the Arrowverse, which was a connection of interconnected shows, but also, you know, those other shows wanted to do their own thing. They were like, you know, I don't want to do the Flashpoint version of our universe or whatever for, you know, half like 4 months, which is fair. So, and they didn't have access to an Aquaman, to a Momoa, if you will, to a Gal Gadot, if you must. So I think that their hands are a little tied. But I do think, like, having seen a couple of different versions now, the TV show version was like the version where like they kind of did it, but then they kind of gave up.
So between the Flash movie and the Flashpoint Paradox, what did you think were the strengths and weaknesses there?
That's interesting because we talked a lot about the Flash movie.
We talked so much about the Flash
multiple times about the Flash movie. I can't say I thought about it a lot since those times. It didn't really like linger in the old mind palace. But I would say the things that I liked about the Flash movie is how he sort of like, in this animated movie, he makes the choice, but he makes it off screen. And
right.
Don't really see him. We find out later on, like you spend most of the movie thinking that this is something that Eobard Thawne did. And then only about like towards the end of the movie do you realize it's something that Barry did. And it's like a big oopsie that he has to fix. Classic Barry Allen. So I liked the aspect of the movie, the actual live action movie, because it's a choice that he makes, it's a mistake that he makes, and the audience gets to see him make the mistake. And it's also not that the animated version doesn't have like a lot of like emotionality behind it, but it feels like in the live action we get to kind of see a little bit more of his mom. We get to really dive deep into like what it means to him to have to make this choice and then to have to reset the choice a little bit more than the animated one did. So I feel like that's what the live action did better. What it did worse is kill Supergirl 100,000.
It did include Supergirl, so that's a
bonus. It
bonus.
Include her,
but it murdered her 1,000 times.
So it's up 1 Supergirl, but down 100 deaths. And also just like, you know, negative check marks for all the CGI. But I liked that the animated version included a lot of the DC characters. So we get Aquaman, we get Wonder Woman, we get some deep cut characters like whoever Canterbury Cricket is, my new favorite character of all time.
Me too. So Canterbury Cricket, this was something I was sort of introduced to because I kind of read some of Flashpoint, but not a ton. But apparently this resistance group that Lois meets in this animated version of Flashpoint are characters that were created for the Flashpoint storyline in the comics. So Grifter, Godiva, Mrs. Hyde, Canterbury Cricket, and Etrigan, I think, was there for a while. Etrigan's been around for quite some time, but Canterbury Cricket, he's a bug-like vigilante operating in England, and he was first seen in the alternate Flashpoint timeline. He was a con man who prayed for superpowers when the Amazons invaded and was turned into a giant cricket.
Oh my God. Be careful what you wish for situation.
This allowed him to lead the ambush bugs and become part of the resistance movement against Aquaman and Wonder Woman.
Ambush bugs!
This character later appeared in the main continuity in the Doomsday Clock series, and he was created by Mike Carlin and Rags Morales, first appearing in Flashpoint. there's a whole issue about him. Flashpoint, the Canterbury Cricket #1.
Yeah, there is. Though I'm getting that.
Yes.
I just want to go deep into his backstory, his theatrical training, if you will. His loves, his hopes, his dreams. No, he was amazing. I was like, well, new favorite character just dropped, but I did like that we got, some of, and I could see it was really interesting because this was obviously released 10 years ago, back in 2013. But I could see a lot of similarities with the 2023 version, is in as far as like the tweaks that the movie made, where they were like, okay, instead of it being Superman, who has been like, held by the US government and is all emaciated in like a room, it's Supergirl, because we can't get Henry Cavill.
Or we didn't want Henry
Cavill.
Mhm.
I'm
sure they could have gotten him.
She is not a substitute Henry Cavill, okay? She is her own person. All the women independent. But like, yeah, I could. So, and like the Batman, instead we got an alternate universe Batman, which is the Michael Keaton Batman, instead of
the Thomas Wayne.
Papa Batman.
Yeah.
Thomas Wayne is his name. I was gonna get there. I like Papa Bats.
I like Papa Bats. Yeah.
Papa Bats, can you hear me? He showed up. He had that 5 o'clock shadow. Everybody was calling him old. It was a tough road for Papa Bats. But yeah, I could see like where they kind of translated some of these things into the movie. So it was interesting for me, having watched the movie like a couple months ago, to be like, oh, okay, this is how they translated that thing. Because I'm assuming that the animated movie is much closer to the comic book storyline than I would assume the movie was.
Yeah, the animated feature film dives into the war between Atlantis and Themyscira, the Amazons, and does the Superman, as you mentioned. So that's a little bit closer to the comic book storyline than the Flash movie was, because some of that didn't appear at all. But you make such a great point about how the storyline in the animated version, this Flashpoint Paradox animated feature film, it doesn't mention Barry goes back to save his mother until the very end. And he says something like, oh, it's because I saved my mom. And I was like, wait, he didn't.
Yeah.
We never saw him save his mother.
I will say, I literally had a moment where I paused the movie and I thought, was I zoning out when that happened?
Yeah.
Like, I was like, this is fully possible that I was just like daydreaming about what I was going to have for lunch and completely forgot to like see it. And I was like, should I rewind? And then I was like, no, Morgan, you shouldn't rewind. You'll wait until the end of the movie, then you'll rewind and see if you missed something. But by the time I got to the end of the movie, I was like, I think they just didn't show it.
Well, you're right. I watched it a long time ago when it first came out, but then for this podcast episode, I rewatched it twice. Once to kind of remember, because it had been a while, and then another time to make some notes. And the first time through, when I rewatched it, I had that same thing. I was like, wait, we never saw him save his mother. And then the second time through, when I was making notes, I was like, okay, we definitely did not see his mother. So I think that did take away from some of the choice that he makes. I think it is supposed to, as you mentioned, supposed to make you think that Eobard Thawne had done this to him. And by the end of it, you realize like that was his choice to make. And so then at the end of the film, we see some of that come to fruition, where he has to go stop his past self from doing it. That I was a little confused about too, because I was like, which one is he? So I got a little confused there. But as I rewatched it, I realized, oh, this is him. The war-torn Barry is now going back in time to like prevent his past self from saving his mother. So I think that would have been a little stronger if we had actually seen him save his mother in the beginning. But I don't know. It was one of those things where it was like, I kind of go with it, because the idea that he would just kind of wake up and be in this new timeline is somewhat interesting. Like I can see why that would be interesting to a filmmaker.
Yeah, I kind of went back and forth on how I felt about that choice, because I feel like I understand why they made it and it allowed them to have that twist at the end. But I do think that in some ways it sucks out a little bit of the emotion of the story, because in some of the versions that I've seen, including the Arrow TV show, like he fully knows what he's doing. He knows that he's messing up the timeline. He's just like, I think it's going to be different this time, Barry. It's never different. But but like, I think going in, making that choice purposefully does kind of give the character a little bit more of like an emotional journey. Whereas waking up randomly and being like, what's going on with the world? Who could have foreseen this thing happening? And then finding out at the end of the movie, like, was it that time that I went back in time and saved my mom? Did you not want to mention that? I feel like it does rob like that decision of some of its power, that we don't see him like dealing with the repercussions. And actively, he's like, this is Eobard. I know it. I, a sweet angel, have not done a wrong thing in my life. I have never touched the timeline. That thing I did yesterday probably is not related to this. He like wakes up, because it does kind of take you, like it stretches the credulity a little bit, that he like wakes up, everything is dramatically different in the timeline, and he
has no powers. There's a world war going on,
and he thinks to himself, what could have caused this? Who knows? Instead of thinking, what could have caused this? Did I just alter the timeline? Perhaps yesterday. Like that never occurs to him until like deep within the movie.
Well, he even justifies it later with Reverse Flash. He was like, no, that wouldn't have caused that problem.
Yes.
It's not that. It's not that big of a deal. It wouldn't have caused all these other problems.
Something has happened to the timeline. Now, admittedly, I just messed with it yesterday, but I think it probably was after I did that whole thing, after I did my oopsies. I'm pretty sure somebody really messed with it. It's like, sure, listen to yourself. Rachel in the chat said, Barry voice, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
It always is. So I think there were some positives, I think, for the Flash movie versus this adaptation. But I think this one, I was pretty invested in the war aspect of the movie, just because it was neat to, as you mentioned, to see which characters were on which side and what the strategy was to, and the cause of this war. So we learn what the cause of the conflict was, and I'm very curious to get your opinion on why they started fighting, but then also the strategy of how to stop them. So Morgan, I'm curious, what did you think about the reasoning for Aquaman and Wonder Woman to essentially cause World War III?
Yeah, so I felt like that needed a lot more fleshing out for me, if I was honest, because so what we end up seeing is we see in like flashback. First off, I wasn't sure when this flashback took place in like space and time. Like, had Themyscira already taken over a bunch of stuff? Had Atlantis decided to take over a bunch of stuff? I didn't know.
The way the movie presents it is that Atlantis comes to Themyscira. I guess they're going to have a diplomatic mission of sorts.
Oh,
and
that makes more sense
then
to me.
while Aquaman and Mera are in Themyscira, some adult things happen.
Yeah. So I completely misinterpreted that, and this makes so much more sense to me.
What did you think happened?
I was thinking about a pork roll, egg, and cheese, apparently, and I was not following the plot of this movie. So I thought that Themyscira had like already taken over, because the premise is that Themyscira has like taken over like somewhere in Europe.
I have notes on this. Hang on a second. Let's see. Themyscira slaughtered 32 million people when they invaded the United Kingdom.
Okay, so Themyscira has taken over the UK. Atlantis has flooded most of Europe and killed like 100 million people.
100 million people died when Atlantis sank Western Europe into the ocean.
Yes. So Themyscira is hanging out on their new island, the UK. And so what I thought was happening, which is incorrect, apparently, was that like Themyscira had already taken over, and like Atlantis had already done something aggressive, and they were like doing like a handshake
Oh,
deal
well,
where
I
they were
mean,
like,
maybe.
where they were like, we're going to join forces and we're going to take over the world, kind of thing. And I thought when Wonder Woman and Aquaman got more acquainted, let us say, that it was like one of those like olden timey things where it's like, to combine our two kingdoms, we must marry and like merge our two. So like I was like, oh, I guess like Wonder Woman and Aquaman are like had like a political marriage and they were like sealing the deal. I was really confused. And then I was like, Mara seems really confused about this, but she was right there when they did that handshake. I was like, why isn't she on board? So every part of your interpretation makes more sense than my interpretation. But I think that it needed more explanation is the thing.
Well, I think that could work. I think you could still go with that interpretation.
It's wildly wrong, but you could go with it, but I don't feel like it's correct.
But the way I saw it was they initially like had some sort of peaceful visit, and then while they were there, Arthur and Diana
like had an affair.
They did. Arthur cheated on Mira, and Mira saw it and got jealous and tried to attack Wonder Woman, and so Diana was like, "Off with her head." And that's what, and that to me, I thought was what started the war.
I gotta say, ladies, take it up with your man first, okay? Because like he's the one breaking the vows. I don't see a ring on Wonder Woman's finger. I see a ring on his finger. Mara, you should have attacked him first, is all I'm saying. And then maybe we could have avoided this whole confrontation. That makes more sense with like how mad Mara was. And at the end, Wonder Woman seems sad to like kill Arthur, like kill Aquaman, and like when everything is blowing up, she's like holding his body and like, oh, I'm so sad. And I was like, why?
But like you killed him though.
Ma'am, what's going on here? Like what emotions are you feeling?
Going through so many emotions.
So I feel like the Wonder Woman Aquaman backstory, I appreciate that they did like an economy of storytelling where they're like, we're going to tell it in these quick flashbacks. And I love that for them. I felt like it needed a little bit more meat on that bone, because I was just like, I don't really get it. Like, why are they so mad at each other? I mean, yeah, she beheaded Mara, and that's like probably not cool. And she's wearing Mara's crown around as a trophy. Also not great. But like, what in the world? So I felt like just a little bit of extra context would have maybe prevented me from being so confused.
I can understand that. I think the idea that the war started because Queen Mara was assassinated, that seems like a pretty good reason to go to war, I guess. But yeah, the Arthur Diana dynamic throughout the story was a little confusing for me, because I was like, you could have just not killed it. Like, you didn't have to kill him. Like, what? Why?
Yeah, well, what's happening
if you still had lingering like obviously they still kind of maybe had feelings for each other, but they just wanted to battle it out. I don't know.
I also feel like if that's what the fight was about, was like this essentially this affair that went wrong and ended with Mara's death, like that's kind of like a dramatic, like meaty story for the characters, and to just kind of skim over the top of it and then try to play it at the end like, oh, she's sad. I'm like, I don't care. Like, you weren't really that into this, like telling too much of this like emotional story. Like, Wonder Woman is basically just like a cartoon villain in this one, killing children and beheading people. So
oh my
like,
God.
why am I supposed to care about her like emotions about killing Aquaman?
She killed Steve Trevor. She hung Steve Trevor using her lasso. Brutal. She also murdered young and poor defenseless Billy Batson. Like
Okay.
as Billy Batson, like murdered a child, straight up
Yeah.
murdered a child. Yeah.
And then, of course, we talked about she literally beheads Mare and then holds up the head. I thought, oh my God, this is animated. What is happening here? Why? So Wonder Woman was on a tear in this one. She was not a friendly lady in this interpretation. I will say the Steve Trevor scene was the scene where I had to pause it and say, this was written by a man, right? And go back because it's like one of the weirdest scenes lines of dialogue I think I've ever heard. I think it's the Steve Trevor scene where he's like saying something about like Lois Lane is embedded in Themyscira. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Listen, Steve, calm down. She's beautiful, but she's more than just her looks. She's an accomplished reporter. And also, Steve, very much, no one asked you. I was like, this is the weirdest line of dialogue I feel like I've ever seen. Like, this dialogue is like sweaty in a way.
I got the vibe that Steve Trevor and Lois Lane were a thing in this Flashpoint universe.
See,
I don't know
backstory. I could have gone with that line, but with the zero backstory we got, I was just like, why would you just drop that?
I haven't read all of Flashpoint because I haven't read the whole, like, because it goes through many different characters and stories and stuff. Apparently Canterbury Cricket has his own Flashpoint issue, so there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of stories that the story goes through. But I got the the idea that Lois Lane and Steve Trevor were a thing, which I think is actually a pretty cool idea. Like, I would be into that, but they never showed it at all. But I agree, the way the dialogue was delivered, it was a little weird because it didn't really go anywhere. Like, Lois never mentions him later, and we get some Lois Lane screen time with the Resistance, but she never sticks up for Steve Trevor in the way he did it. So yeah, that was a little strange. But Wonder Woman does kill a lot of people in this story. So what did you think about the dynamic between because we spend a lot of time with Barry Allen and Thomas Wayne. What did you think about that dynamic? And because that we do see the sort of I hate to compare them, but like we see this same kind of dynamic in the Flash movie, but it's played a little differently there with the Michael Keaton and Ezra Miller dynamic. So what did you think about Thomas Wayne here?
Yeah, I really liked the idea of it not just being an older Bruce Wayne, but being Thomas Wayne who survived the attack. And that instead of Thomas and Martha dying, it was little Bruce who got killed in the alleyway. And I was like, oh, what an interesting, like, what a smart subversion of the Superman story. And the
you mean the Batman story?
Batman story, of course. It's WB, of course, it's Batman. And the reveal in the movie, spoiler alert for a 10-year-old animated movie, but that Martha is the Joker, that blew my mind. I was like, I would watch an animated something in this universe because that's crazy. And I feel like that is like ripe for storytelling potential. I was like, I want the Thomas Wayne Batman spin-off movie where he's like, Martha, and she's just like cackling. I love that. I saw that was one of the best twists in the movie. And I liked the way that they interacted with each other. I thought it was really cool. Again, we see a lot of the stuff because we just watched the Flash movie back in June.
Yes.
There was like a lot of stuff that was very familiar in this movie, including, him going, I need to get my powers back again. You're going to have to electrocute me with lightning and chemicals, and it'll go great, I'm sure. Although in this version, did they do it twice in the movie version?
Yes, because in the movie, it's like one of the only cool things Supergirl gets to do is that when Barry gets electrocuted and he's got a lot of problems, she flies him up into the lightning storm.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that was very cool.
Yeah.
Good for Supergirl. I thought this was cool. I thought it was cool to see like another interpretation of like those scenes. Yeah, and I like the way that they interacted with each other. I like the little sort of moment at the end where he gives him the letter to give to Bruce because he knows Bruce is alive in his version. Then he gives it to Bruce and like Bruce like cries. Oh man, that got me right in the emotions. I was like, you know what? I felt like I probably couldn't feel anything about Bruce Wayne's parents getting killed after like seeing it for the 400th time. But it turns out I can still be sad about it. And I thought that was just such a nice little moment where he tells, Barry that he's like a great delivery service.
Yeah, he's a great messenger, which is interesting because the Flash is modeled after what is it the Greek god Hermes? Mercury, maybe. Yes, one of those.
So.
Who was a messenger? Do we have a lab cat situation?
Bunsen is here. I was hoping that the chords were not going to be appealing to him tonight.
He's going straight for them.
But they are. They still are. You know what? The heart wants what it wants. Kind of a Wonder Woman Aquaman situation here. Where the end of the world's going to come about because Bunsen has to chew the cords. Buddy, we can do better. We can ask better for ourselves, can't we? The cords are in a committed relationship, Bunsen, much like Aquaman was. Hi, buddy.
We need to get Bunsen his own set of chords.
We do, yeah. Just like a couple of play chords that I can give him when he comes up to visit.
So we'll work on that. Maybe some.
Somebody's purring. Hi. Yeah, it's Bunsen time, he says.
Actually, is he still purring?
He is, but he purrs so.
Can you put your mic down there?
He purrs so quietly. Oh, he's already done purring.
Oh,
he's very quiet. Beaker, however, like when he goes to town, I can like. One time I was on the phone with somebody and they were like, "Is your cat purring?" Yes, he is. Bunsen likes to keep it closer to the vest. Bunsen is intensely private, right, buddy? Intensely private, Bunsen. We are so close to the computer right now.
We are getting a lot of Bunsen time. He really has been enjoying the live streams lately.
He really has. He's been loving the limelight. He's like, oh, I see why Beaker does it.
Yeah, he's really taken over Beaker's spot there.
So Rachel says it is, I believe it's pronounced Hermes. She said Mercury is the Roman equivalent.
Yes, correct. I liked this dynamic of Thomas Wayne in this animated version just because it did have that emotion, whereas Michael Keaton's Batman didn't really have as much of it.
It was more like a nostalgia. It had emotion if you were like, I remember being a child and watching these Michael Keaton movies, but then it was just like you facing your own mortality. It wasn't anything that's really coming from the movie. You were just like, remember those days?
The similarity, I guess, runs in the fact that Batman does die in both versions.
Yes.
But I really like the way he goes out in this one, where he chooses to shoot the reverse flash in order to
what a screenshot
in order to get Barry to go back in time. And what I thought was cool about this visual of the Thomas Wayne Batman shooting reverse flash, where he basically shoots straight through his chest. So there's like this big hole in his chest, and it's gross. But earlier in the film, Barry calls him the James Bond of superheroes. And this sort of looks to me like a James Bond intro sequence. So I thought that was pretty cool.
In like the bullet hallway
in
the James Bond movies.
Yeah, so I thought that was visually really cool. That was probably my favorite visual of the entire movie, was the homage to James Bond.
He decided he wanted to be up on the lamp, so I just didn't want him to knock over the lamp.
No. Bunsen does love the light.
He loves to find his light is the thing. He's like, that warm glow of the lamp, I must have it.
All right. Well, before we move on, maybe we should hop into the chat to see what else people are talking about. Mind the Gap is talking about the TV version, saying Flashpoint should have been a crossover story. I think they did similar stuff enough later on with Legends of Tomorrow and the Elseworld story. Yeah, it could have. Flashpoint could have been a whole crossover event that they could have done, but they chose to do it at the very beginning of season 3. Let's see. I think there was a question in here about Supergirl from New Rachel. Where do you think Supergirl is during this movie? Is she still in the Phantom Zone? Has she been captured by a different government organization? What are your thoughts, Morgan? What's Supergirl doing at this moment?
That she's down at the permit office in the Phantom Zone. She's trying to build like a dual use shed. But they keep giving her the runaround. They're like, you need to put this in, you need to put that in. She's like, how many shelves can you possibly have in the Phantom Zone? They're like, we need to do a lot of filing here. Anyway. No, I feel like the Phantom Zone probably makes the most sense, or like maybe just floating out in space. Maybe there's like a dark thing where like she's just out there, she's just floating around.
Yeah, Supervisor Steve in the Phantom Zone has just really been giving her too much work to do. She cannot take a break there in the Phantom Zone break room. She's got a lot going on. Yeah, I don't know. I guess in this universe, Supergirl doesn't exist, or maybe she is in stasis like she normally is in a lot of these stories, where she is asleep for a long time and then somehow she wakes up and finds herself on Earth. Let's see. Brian in the chat says ambush bug. We talked about the ambush bugs with Canterbury Cricket. The ambush bug creator Keith Giffen passed away a few days ago. So yeah, sorry to hear about that news. But Keith Giffen left us a good legacy of great comic books and great comic book characters. And then Mind the Gap also says this movie, The Flashpoint Paradox, is actually referenced in Suicide Squad, Hell to Pay, and Justice League Dark Apocalypse War, which I think is why the post-credit tease, the very, very, very end, is like is like a parademon coming out. It's very short.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
It's
the funny thing is,
it's very,
I watched
very short.
like 90% of the credits because I was like, I want to know who the voices are for everybody, because the only one I recognized was Nathan Fillion.
Right. Oh,
as Green Lantern.
I want to ask you about what you thought about Green Lantern in this movie, because I know normally you don't care for Green Lantern.
You know what? I didn't care for him. No, to be honest, I feel like the funny answer is I didn't care for him, but the truth is I didn't. I think that they killed his character off too soon. Like they give him this basically the Green Lantern ship to pilot, and he immediately crashes it, and that's it. He's dead. R.I.P. And I was like, wait, but like now he's gonna get the Green Lantern powers, and they're like, we'll never forget you, Hal. And I was like, what? Really? And you know, it's pretty bad. It's a pretty abrupt death if I'm like, give me more Green Lantern.
It sounds like you did care for Green Lantern.
I did. I was like, wait a minute. Hal's getting a raw deal here. At least make me try to care.
Yeah, so Green Lantern, he was there kind of at the beginning in the normal timeline, being buds with Barry. But then he does kill himself in a kamikaze crash to help the United States government with that ship. Let's see. I want to kind of go back to the chat just to get some things covered. Mind the Gap says, I think one thing the comics did was that Thawne had already killed Barry's mom, so Barry going back and saving her, he could not predict would change things. They never address, similarly to the Flash movie, the Flashpoint Paradox never addresses who kills Nora Allen. She's just murdered and dead. We don't have any kind of answer as to how she's murdered.
You see like a person behind her.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. I was like, hey, look at who is that guy? I thought there was going to be like a reveal. But no, there's not. It's just a guy.
I will say, I like what the Flash TV show did with that, in that they show that she is murdered and that there's a whole deal with his father going on trial. Of course, in a movie, you can't really go into that in so much detail. So I can understand why they leave that out.
I think there was so much other stuff in this animated movie because they had access to like all the DC characters, so they could have like Wonder Woman and Batman and Aquaman and Superman having like really significant parts, whereas like there was probably actors and contractual obligations and DC Warner Brothers red tape in the live action, where there probably was just like less room for that in the animated, because they had, again, the whole Wonder Woman Aquaman situation that I apparently deeply misunderstood, and then they had they had the Batman stuff, and they had like, Superman has a little bit of his own thing going on. He's just kind of sad in the corner, and he has no friends, and then he makes one friend, and then
And that friend dies.
then he dies, and he's like, my friend, my one friend. Poor Cyborg. But Cyborg feels like the only like nice person in this universe too, where he was like, hey guys, like let's be heroes, and everybody else was like, meh. Every time anything bad happened to Cyborg, I was like, no, not Cyborg, he's trying real hard here.
Do you think he was questionable because he worked for the government? That seemed to be in
Ooh.
contention with Thomas Wayne's Batman.
Yeah, that's true. I would have liked a little bit more of that, like that backstory about them, because they seemed to like they had a very contentious relationship, because he was like, well, you're part of the government, and Cyborg's like, yeah, I'm trying to help. I thought that was really interesting. They brought up some interesting stuff where I feel like in maybe like a TV show or a longer version of this, they could have dived into a little bit more. But the version that we saw, I mean, kind of made it seem like Cyborg was just trying to like corral cats constantly. As being like,
That's true, actually.
these are my superhero children. Some of them actual children. I'm comfortable with putting these 12-year-olds in danger. Why aren't you? And he's like, that's that guy. That's that guy. Here's a bug. He's my ringer. This guy. It's like, oh, really? That guy's your ringer? So I liked his sort of role as like the leader of this new kind of pseudo Justice League, where it was like, this is a bunch of random people I bumped into in my travels. They're all my, my good squad, and everybody's just kind of like sitting there like, I don't think we can do this, guys.
Yeah, I was
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
I did have a question about Shazam.
Yes.
What was his name in this one? Like Captain Thunder? Or?
Wonder Woman calls him in the alternate timeline, calls him Captain Thunder.
Okay, because he's in the comics, he's Captain Marvel, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So so in the movies, I don't have a lot of experience with like the Shazam Captain Marvel character. In the movies, it's one child who turns into like a more grown-up version of himself, and that's Captain Marvel, Shazam. In this, it seems like they did like a Captain Planet with their powers combined, and like like the superhero was many children, and I found that disturbing on like a lot of levels.
So the Shazam family, they all turn into basically superhero adult versions of themselves,
Yes,
all by saying Shazam.
it seems that way, but in this movie, it felt like they only turned into one guy. Like all of them turned into one guy, and then when she asks, when Wonder Woman puts the lasso of truth around the guy's neck, like Captain Thunder's neck, and is like, "What? How do you become a child again?" He says like Shazam, and then it's just a bunch of kids on there, and I was like, wait a minute, did they pull like a dozen kids in a trench coat kind of situation here? like for real? I was very confused with like the mechanics of it, that like with our powers combined, we become this grown adult man. I was like, I don't like that, if I'm being honest.
I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch that. I guess I just assumed, because I knew that all the Shazam kids could turn into adult superhero versions of themselves. But I'll have to go back and look at how they did that.
Because I was looking around for like the adult versions of when he was like Shazam, and I was like, oh, you're in trouble now, because there's like gonna be 5 adult superheroes, and then it was just one guy, and I was like, wait a minute, did they all just did they all just become that one guy?
That makes that even worse.
It makes it pretty bad.
Because if you're right, and that's how they depicted it, then when he turns back into young Billy Batson, is that Wonder Woman killing all of those kids at once?
I don't. So that's a good question because she only kills young Billy Batson. She doesn't kill the other kids. But like, it did feel like they were doing like a Power Ranger situation where it's you're the arm. It's like great. I don't know. I had many questions. I thought maybe this was like there was like a comic book story I was missing where it's like, well, when he Shazams, he becomes Captain Marvel, but when he super Shazams, he sucks up the other children and they become Captain Thunder. And I was like, I don't like that. Don't love that at all.
Traditionally, it should be individual kids turning into individual superheroes. So that's how it should be. But I'll have to go back and look to see how they presented it. Mine the gap in the chat says Captain Thunder was the character's original name, so I guess that was a throwback to that.
I just found myself with a lot of questions that I didn't really want the answers to, but that I was like, did I miss something? I mean, like, admittedly, the comics are weird. Like, weird stuff happens in the comics. There's weirder things that happen in the comics than like a bunch of children becoming a grown adult. So,
I mean, the premise is weird enough, but yeah, I'm not really sure how. I'll have to go back and look at. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up now.
It's possible I fundamentally misunderstood every aspect of this movie. I swear to God, I watched it.
I really like the interpretation, though. I think it
the Power Rangers interpretation.
Yes, I think that actually makes it more interesting. I don't know if it's correct, but
it might not be. But who knows?
I think we'll have to go back. Maybe before this live stream ends, I'll try to pull it up and see if we can get that fact checked. But
why fact check us if you know in the comics?
Well, we'll have to go back and check that out. I guess that sort of leads into a discussion that I'd want to have about the animation and the animation style and how things were put together in the edit, how everything flowed together. So, Morgan, what did you think about the presentation of this animated film? Take away the story, take away the confusion of the Shazam kids and the Wonder Woman Aquaman affair. What did you think about the way this animated film looked?
I didn't mind it. I think it was kind of, there was a little bit of like an anime influence on the art style. I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought the animation was pretty like well done. I didn't have some of the character designs were like, wow, those proportions, that man would just kind of fall over if he had that prominent of a chest and that snatched of a waist. But but that's kind of comic book. That's kind of like comic book art in general. Yeah, I thought the animation was actually really well done. I didn't love all the character designs, but I thought like in general it looked really nice. It looked like they spent some money. They had some time and care into this one.
Yeah, I don't love the tall and lanky versions of them, and like Aquaman was just too big.
Yeah,
like his traps, his neck, like it's too much.
This makes me feel better because that was kind of my critique. Is like everyone's just too big. Like everybody has been juicing in this animated movie like a lot. Like everybody's roid raged out.
They're either too big or too skinny. Too thin. Like some of them were like tall and really thin. So I think they nailed it with the looks of the characters and their suits and the way the designs were actually done. I thought was very good. But the actual animation of them, I think some of them were just too big. Although Green Lantern, Hal Jordan was looking okay.
Hal Jordan, again, I mean, this is maybe the most I've ever cared about Green Lantern because I thought he was the only one who looked kind of reasonable. And I was like, oh, did they just kill him? That's not cool. So they did something right with Green Lantern, but everybody else was too yoked for me.
Yeah, so I wasn't crazy about the way they looked, but I think for the most part, the cinematic quality for an animated feature film was pretty good. The action sequences, despite some of the confusion about the Shazam kids, I thought was
So
pretty good.
I might have answered the Shazam question for myself. And
Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to be sad that I did. So there's an article from Screen Rant from
Oh,
2022.
can you share it via the present on StreamYard so we can follow along?
I absolutely can.
Did someone write an article about that?
Let's share this screen. I looked up. My search query is going to be one of the wildest things that you will probably ever see. It was like Captain Thunder, Shazam, kids. So enjoy that. So this article from March 2022 by Sean Corley says Shazam's darkest form flipped the idea of his superhero family. During the 2011 Flashpoint events, readers saw the darkest version of Shazam yet, one that flipped the script on the concept of the Shazam family. So I skimmed down because I'm not reading this whole thing. I'm trying to podcast.
TDL, what is it? Too long didn't read.
Too long didn't read. So basically, here's the important part that I'm highlighting. So
Okay.
it says in Flashpoint number 1, readers encounter a reality created when the Flash accidentally breaks the timeline. There, they meet Captain Thunder, the broken timeline's version of Shazam. The children comprising the family, Billy, Mary, Freddie, Darla, Eugene, and Pedro, along with Tawny the Tiger, are each I don't know who that is. Are each imbued with an aspect of Shazam's power. That is, Eugene has Solomon's wisdom, Billy has the courage of Achilles, and so forth. When they say the magic word Shazam, they combine to form Captain Thunder.
So you were correct.
I called that, unfortunately, and I don't like it. I'm just going to go on record as saying I don't like it. It says, unlike his Earth Zero counterpart, however, Captain Thunder is much darker with a stoic demeanor and deep scars on his face. The children bring Captain Thunder forth to ask for his help in the Atlantean Amazon War. So they combine with their powers combined. They make Captain Thunder.
So Wonder Woman killed a bunch of kids
maybe killed a bunch of kids at once.
Wow.
Not cool. Cool.
Wow. Now I really want to go back and read all of the Flashpoint comics because I feel like I'm missing a lot of stuff. And,
now I'm like, wait, do I need to this is what is happening in these comics? This is wild.
Mind the Gap in the chat says Flashpoint is the first appearance of Pedro, Eugene, and Darla. So I guess their interpretation started out as the your powers combine. So the movies actually did something different than Flashpoint. So that is really surprising. I was not expecting that. So I guess we answered that question. So thank you for doing that digging, Morgan, so that we could have conclusion to that.
Thank you. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I thought I was seeing something, and I'm glad that I was right about at least one thing in this movie.
Well, you caught it very well in a way that I did not pay attention to it. So thank you for catching that. Okay, so I guess are there any other things that you wanted to talk about that we didn't already bring up about the Flashpoint paradox?
I mean, if I feel like the 2023 version did one thing I liked, it have Supergirl in it. It would have been great to have I spent a lot of this movie going, a lot of dudes, so many dudes. There are maybe 3 female characters. Oh, that might be generous.
3 main ones, but a lot of Amazons. So you got Wonder Woman, you got Mira, you got Lois. Nora Allen's kind of a big character.
Yeah, Nora Allen. So you've got about 4 as opposed to 500 superhero men. So I while it's cool to see Superman and I did think halfway through, hey, where's Superman? It feels like he could fix this pretty easily. I like that the 2023 version, for various reasons that probably more have to do with contract disputes than creativity, included Supergirl, because it did feel like a little bit necessary, with Wonder Woman being a villain, to just have a superhero who was also a woman.
Yeah, that would have been great. So I
Also,
agree.
I gotta be honest. I was surprised to see Lois Lane with that that gun, just going in there. She was like,
She's got to
"Here."
defend herself somehow.
She's like, "Listen, I'm in the middle of this. I'm in it now."
She needed to get in there and shoot some Amazons and Atlanteans.
You
Although
don't mess
nothing
with
would
Lois
really
Lane.
nothing would really happen to them. I don't think you could just shoot them with a gun, pew pew. But she was in there doing it. She was defending herself, and she was trying to get them to stop fighting, which and reporting from the ground what was happening.
Yeah.
So very useful, very helpful. Yeah, this animated movie, I think for the most part is pretty good. I think some of the direction could have used a little bit of help to clarify some things, like we talked about. But I think for the most part, I think it got the story from A to B, even though, as we talked about previously, I think having more of a connection to Nora Allen and seeing Barry make that choice would have made it stronger. But I do understand the choice there to have him wake up in a strange new world. And I think the way that they played it, where when he wakes up initially and sees that he's in this different timeline and understands like the Flash is not a thing, and there's world war going on, and then at the end when he wakes up again, I liked the way that the directing and the writing played with that idea of him waking up a second time and then everything has been corrected. Everything it kind of followed that same sequence of events where he woke up at work and talked to the same guy and saw the different headline. I think it helped put me in a place where I understood that the timeline had changed. So I think that choice is a good one to play with if you're going to have one timeline be different and then have it be corrected by the end of it. I thought that was a good way to do that. I did laugh about Captain Boomerang in this one because it made me I have a lot of questions about Captain Boomerang now, because there's a sequence at the beginning that we didn't really talk about, but it featured the Flash going after the Rogues because the Rogues are messing around in the Flash Museum. It's a whole ploy to get the Flash to be there for Reverse Flash and his diabolical plan. And Captain Boomerang throws his boomerangs, of course, and the boomerangs come back and hit him. And I just was watching the movie thinking, does this happen to Captain Boomerang a lot? I feel like it probably does.
I feel like Captain Boomerang is like Kite Man in the Harley Quinn animated series, where it's like he's not really good at it. Like, he's not really good at villaining. He's like, my whole thing is boomerangs. He throws it and just like hits him in the back of the head like constantly.
Like, what does he expect is going to happen?
Is boomerang. So I mean, you feel like you would be better at getting out of the way of your own boomerang at this point.
Yeah, that was the big thing. I mean, I thought the thing with the bomb and the bombs and like the Justice League having to detonate or to get rid of the bombs in the various ways that they did, I thought that was all very cool. But the one big takeaway I had from that sequence was Captain Boomerang maybe needs to rethink the boomerang thing, because that's not very smart.
I also liked from that sequence when Aquaman is like, I've got this. He throws the guy in the water. He's like, how is this having it? He's like, what was it, like the microbiome or eating through the wires as we speak? And I like, honestly, I would have been like, ew.
It works.
I mean, I love that I'm being rescued, but ew.
It is kind of gross to think about, but that, Aquaman was doing what he knew to do, so that was how he could contribute to the solution.
Love you, Aquaman.
At least he wasn't cheating on his wife.
That's
in
true.
That
that's true. This version is loyal, at least.
Well, do you have any other closing thoughts, or did we cover that already? Do you have any other thoughts?
Overall, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty good interpretation of I think of the Flashpoint story. I've seen a couple different versions, but at some point I have to read the comics I think that it's based on, and then I'll have like a more informed decision. But yeah, I thought it did a lot. It was doing a lot, and it did it pretty well. I do think that it skimmed over a couple of things that would have made it like a little bit maybe more emotional for the characters, or like help the viewer get there with where the characters were. And I think that like by like you said, by dropping Barry like right into the middle of the story and him going like immediately, Eobard must have done this. What villain could have done this? And as everybody's like slowly pointing at him, um, I just feel like him like making that decision to make that change is more affecting from a character perspective, because then we can kind of follow that emotional journey of him having to make the decision to undo the change, I think, which is the thing that actually the live action movie did better, is that they did ground that whole thing in the decision to save his mom and like what are the repercussions, whereas we don't even get to see this Barry make that decision, which I think kind of robs it of some of the power of the story.
Yeah, if you are a DC Comics fan that wants to see a story set in the world of DC with a lot of DC characters, this is a great movie for you. There's even Lex Luthor and Deathstroke and Black Manta and a whole bunch of characters. So if you like the world of DC, this is a good one for you. If you're a Flash fan, this is a good one for you, because I think despite not having that emotional character moment that would have been better, it did feel like a Flash story.
It
So,
did. Yeah.
so
It felt like this one was really focused on the Flash, whereas the movie from this year didn't. I mean, it was a Flash story, but there's a lot of Batman in there.
there were a lot of Batman. So this one did feel like a Flash story all the way through. So if you like the character of Barry Allen, this is also a good one to check out. Okay, so Morgan, would you like to make some snap judgments?
I would love to.
In the game of snap judgments, each person is presented with 2 options, but must only choose one. First instincts are recommended and explanations are unnecessary.
Okay, so our first snap judgment. Who would win in a fight? Yo-Yo or the Top?
So we didn't talk about Yo-Yo.
That's true.
But Yo-Yo was a new character for the Flashpoint comic book story, created in Flashpoint #1, I guess, from 2011. So this was a character in the Flashpoint comics who then showed up in the Flashpoint Paradox animated film. And I think the major thing here with Yo-Yo, the character, is that she uses yo-yos as a weapon.
Yeah.
So that's her big thing. And then
He
like
loves yo-yos.
and then like the Top turns in, like his superpower is that he becomes a top and he spins around. So
both great powers, both based on toys that maybe were nearby at the time.
I love the idea of Yo-Yo. I think you could do a lot of tricks.
So many fun tricks with yo-yos.
You could walk the dog. You could do all kinds of things.
Could you imagine all the villain puns that they could do with like, it's time to walk the dog?
But I think the Top is probably more effective. There's a tornado situation going there. So Yo-Yo would have to stop the tornado in order to be effective. So I think the Top's got this one.
I think that's fair. I felt my issue with the Top was it felt more like or Yo-Yo is it felt like more like Yo-Yo was supposed to be like a Harley Quinn stand-in.
Yeah.
To the point where I was like, is that Harley Quinn? And it took me a really long time to realize, like, no, it's a different character. It's not Harley Quinn. So just for originality of character, I'm going to give it to the Top. That man, he loves tops. He loves spinning them. He loves throwing them. Good for him. He knows what he's about.
Okay, so an improvisational snap judgment to piggyback off of that one.
Love it.
Who wins in a fight, Yo-Yo or Harley Quinn?
I think Harley Quinn, definitely. I feel like while Yo-Yo was giving Harley Quinn energy, Harley Quinn is unhinged. And so, like, you can never really know what Harley Quinn's going to do next. But, like, Yo-Yo, I feel like is really committed to her Yo-Yo bit.
Yeah. I think Harley is very committed to beating someone in a fight. So I think Harley would get that one. Yeah.
It turns out I'm like not super off base with the Harley Quinn comparisons because Mind the Gap says Yo-Yo is even voiced by, I think that's Hayden Walsh, who is a semi-regular Harley voice. So probably why it was giving Harley Quinn vibes.
Just do what you know.
Also, Rachel said, I think Wynn's dad also used a yo-yo to kill someone once.
You could strangle somebody. Man, they can be dangerous.
That yo-yo can be dangerous.
Yeah.
You be careful with your yo-yos. And then Rachel also says a female version of the top was also in the Flash season 3, I think.
Right. Yes.
That feels
correct.
right. I don't have memories of it, but I believe it happened. Okay. Which was the more brutal murder from Wonder Woman? We did talk about this. She killed a lot of people in this movie. So was it when she killed Mara and she decapitated her and held up her head? Or was it when she killed little Billy Batson and maybe
all the Shazam kids?
Maybe all of the Shazam kids, but definitely little Billy Batson.
I think after talking about the Shazam kids and how they're basically all the same Shazam, I'm going to go with the brutal murder of small children wrapped up in one small child.
Yeah, I think I gotta go with the murder of Billy Batson too, because I think you could make an argument if you were, say, a Diana apologist and you were like, maybe Mara had it coming. That Mara attacked her first.
Yes.
Was defending herself. Maybe didn't need to decapitate her. That seems a bit far.
She also didn't need to have an affair with Mira's husband. That feels like a self-inflicted wound.
Didn't need to do that either. But like the Shazam kids were down. She like picks that kid up unconscious and just like knifes him while he's
with a broken sword too.
Yeah,
like not even like a good sword, like a just a fragment of a sword.
Truly brutal brutal action there from Diana. So I think that's unjustified. So I'm going Billy Batson. Okay. Which team up story would you be more interested in reading? Lois Lane and Canterbury Cricket, or Steve Trevor and Citizen Cold?
Yeah, so in the new timeline, Captain Cold is kind of taking the place of the Flash as the hero of
yeah.
I think it's got to be Lois Lane and Canterbury Cricket. I'm sure they would get up to all kinds of shenanigans, lots of adventures. I would want to see that story.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. I didn't even have to think about this snap judgment. It was immediate. I was like, Canterbury Cricket's there. I'm there.
We should write that story.
My two favorite DC characters, Lois Lane and Canterbury Cricket. You don't have to sell me on that one.
You could write a whole story like playing off the Canterbury Tales.
Oh my gosh,
like, what if
you so much?
Yeah. Let's talk about this off air, but I think we should pitch this story.
We got it. We got to do
we
this.
need to work on this.
People are crying out for this.
We need to. I think only we can bring this to DC Comics. So let's make this a goal to make that happen. All right. Well, I think that's going to take us out of Snap Judgments. No judgments on your Snap Judgments.
Before we wrap up, I did want to bring up Brian's comment here because it makes the murder of the Shazam kids even worse to me somehow.
Oh no.
Which is Brian says, if Mr. Tawny was part of Captain Thunder, then Wonder Woman also killed a cat, which is unacceptable.
I mean, that really truly is heinous.
Terrible. I'm going to ask Bunsen what he thinks about that later.
I'm sure he's going to have
now, but he's going to have some stuff to say.
He finally went to sleep. He was like, I'm giving up on the microphone cords.
He's like, the life of the limelight, it's not for me. I got to go take a nap.
Well, I'm sure he's going to have some real strong thoughts about Wonder Woman killing Tawny.
Mr.
Tawny?
Tawny the cat, I think.
Yes. Just truly heinous Wonder Woman. I'm glad the timeline got fixed so that she's not killing children and cats anymore. So that is good. All right. Well, I think we need to get to some Supergirl Radio and some DC TV podcast plugs. If you would like to contact Supergirl Radio, you can post a comment on our website at supergirlradio.com. You can email us at supergirlradio@gmail.com. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can call us at 678-718-7252. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram, all at Supergirl Radio. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Podchaser, and Spotify, where we also have a Spotify playlist that includes music featured on and inspired by the CW Supergirl TV series. We are listed on DC's fan page, which you can find at dccomics.com/DC-fans. If you like what we do, we encourage you to give us a rating and write us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy our Supergirl Radio live streams, make sure to subscribe to the DC TV Podcast YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to get notified when we go live and wired. DC TV Podcast also has a TeePublic store, so if you're in need of new DC TV related t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, onesies, mugs, notebooks, pillows, or stickers, go to supergirlradio.com and click on the TeePublic store link at the top of the page.
Hello, and thank you for calling the DC TV Podcast hotline. Please listen carefully as some of our menu options have changed. Supergirl Radio? Press 1. The Flash Podcast? Press 2. Legends of Tomorrow Podcast? Press 3. The Lithuanian Room? Press 4. DC on HBO Max Podcast? Press 5. Stargirl Podcast? Press 6. Superman and Lois Radio? Press 7. Green Lantern Podcast? Press 8. The Sandman Podcast? Press 9. Justice League Dark Podcast? Press 10. DC After Dark? Press 11. For all other inquiries, please stay on the line and the next available agent will be with you shortly.
I think in the new year, maybe we get some new plugs.
I think we might have to.
They're pretty out of date. So maybe we'll have a new plugs contest in the coming 2024.
Oh God, that's scary. That's not that far away. You know what else was scary in this one? Wonder Woman. And transition. And since Wonder Woman murdered a young and defenseless Billy Batson, probably also all of his friends, and maybe a cat, we have some Shazam designs in the DC TV Podcast TeePublic store that we would like to suggest, in case you are sad about it.
Yeah, R.I.P. to the Shazam family. So we do have some Shazam merchandise in the DC TV Podcast TeePublic store. So if you would like to rep the Captain Marvel Shazam family, we have lots of cool designs in the store for you. Well, we would also like to thank our legion of super sponsors for supporting the Supergirl Radio Patreon. These people are Michael, Anne-Marie, Yvonne, Quinn, Nicola, Abby, Miriam, Nicole, Brian, Ethan, Danny, Majuba, and Lingonberry. If you would like to become a legion of super sponsor, visit patreon.com/Supergirl Radio. And thank you for your support. If you would like to keep in touch with me, you can follow me on Instagram at the Derby Kid. And I'm also on a platform called Vero True Social, which you can find out what I've been reading or listening to or watching. You would see that recently I rewatched Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox. So that was something I posted
about that.
And so I think I posted about that. There were a couple of things that I posted about, and now I cannot remember. But if I have not posted that I watched the Flashpoint Paradox, I will make sure that I do. I like to keep up with everything I've been watching lately. I also have a personal YouTube channel at youtube.com/duckmilkprod if you would like to follow me over there.
Okay. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Mojotastic. And you can also find me as a co-host on the Legendary Ladies podcast, where we are going all in for spooky season. So we recently did our top 5 horror movies. This week we talked about the 2011 horror movie You're Next, which I was like, oh my God, I remember digital cameras you carried around. And I believe next time around, we're going to talk about Crimson Peak, which is more of like gothic, spooky horror, which should be really fun. So if you want to follow us through our spooky season, you should definitely check us out on your favorite podcast provider. You can also find us on YouTube at youtube.com/The Legendary Ladies, where we are posting our live streams.
I am very interested in your lists. I just remembered some things I was posting about on Vero True Social about some things I've been watching, and two things I watched recently. It kind of in the spooky season feel, even though I'm not like a scary movie person anymore. I've been trying to catch up on Tim Burton movies that I have not seen.
Oh yeah, they're usually pretty spooky.
I got into a Tim Burton little mini marathon over the weekend, and I had seen Sleepy Hollow a long time ago.
Oh yeah, Sleepy Hollow is fun. We watched it last year, I think.
Yeah,
and it was fun because I hadn't seen it since it came out.
That's probably when I saw it, so it'd been a while, but I rewatched that one. It was pretty good. And then I also watched Dark Shadows. I had never seen Dark Shadows with
I haven't seen that one actually.
It was actually pretty good. I mean, it was campy in bits, but it was very much a Tim Burton movie. It was interesting because it was Tim Burton comedy, which was partly very strange for me.
I mean, some of his movies are more comedic, I think, but it's usually like a dark comedy, like where the comedy is more of like an undertone versus like a straight comedy.
Although I will say, the first Tim Burton movie I ever saw was Pee-wee's Big Adventure, probably my favorite movie of all time. That's straight comedy.
That's
so I guess
true.
it's not. I guess I'm more used to nowadays the Tim Burton movies where it's like creepy and like a lot of them are about death, and
I feel like Beetlejuice is also kind of a comedy.
It's comedy, but it's definitely a dark comedy.
Oh yeah, for sure,
for sure. Yeah, but Pee-wee's Big Adventure is just like straight comedy. So really, I guess Tim Burton. I'll remove that from the record. Scratch that from the record. Tim Burton movies have maybe always been a little underlying comedic thread there. So I don't know why I was so surprised, but Dark Shadows had a good bit of comedy, and it was done pretty well. So I would recommend it if you're interested in it. It had a pretty good cast as well. So you would know that if you follow me on Vero True Social and keep up with what I'm watching. But I think that's going to do it for this episode of Supergirl Radio. But until next time, I'm still Rebecca Johnson.
And I'm still Morgan Glennon. And Thomas Wayne's bedside manner sucks. Barry should find another doctor.
McGurk! I love typing.
Not mess with my Google Docs, Meeksy.
Supergirl Radio is going live every night of the week. How do you like it? Is becoming a human burrito a plus or a minus? I don't know. It does seem snug.
I mean, they say you are what you eat.
Kira. I love that.
So I do a podcast called Supergirl Radio, and one of our segments is Lena Luthor, Boardroom or Ballroom, because her outfit,
she looks like a boss in this coat.
Nasty Luthor like a different Luthor? It's not just Lena being mean?
No.
Helen Slater here. So fun to know that you're hosting a podcast called Supergirl Radio.
Yeah!